Hello YouTube, this is Real Talk with Nazael, bringing you another video. What are we going to discuss today? We're going to discuss making a one-piece stone mold from a latex master. A lot of people that are mask makers want to reproduce their work later on, and everybody knows that a stone mold has a lifespan behind it. The more copies you make, the more detail you lose. I'm going to show you my method of making a one-piece stone mold. If you're thinking of making a mask and you're thinking of making a mask for yourself and a couple copies for your friends, turn off this video. This isn't a video for you. This is for mask makers that want to reproduce their work over and over and over and over again. What are the benefits of having a one-piece mold? No seam line at all. This is a piece that was pulled from my one-piece production mold. There's absolutely no seam line on this piece. It's one complete latex prop or mask that can actually be worn. In order to have the product be able to be worn, we have to go back, all the way back to the sculpting stage. Latex shrinks as it cures. This is my master copy of a piece I make called the Dreamer. And if you look at the master copy and the production copy is slightly smaller. Overall, the mask shrinks 1 inch. So we have to go back to the sculpting stage and think about making your mold while you're sculpting, because I knew that I was going to eventually make a one-piece mold out of the sculpture. I sculpted the sculpture 2 inches larger than my target size. My target size is 24 inches round from the brow to the back of the head. The neck was about 19 inches wide on the sculpture. I completed my sculpture. I was very happy with it. It was time to make a two-piece stone mold from it, which is this very hairy monstrosity with burlap reinforced in the inside and all that. The mold probably weighs about 40-something pounds. Fill up the cavity with latex, and you're talking about 50, 60 pounds of mold there. Make your two-piece stone mold, crack it open, let the mold sit for like 3 days so it dries out. I then make my master copy. Because the sculpture was 26 inches, what this mold will produce, it will be 1 inch smaller overall. So the master will end up being 25 inches round, and the neck will shrink as well. I poured my latex thin. This is very important. A lot of people out there suggest you pour a really thick master. If you pour a really thick master, what's going to happen? You have more rubber to deal with. There's going to be more shrinkage involved. The thinner it is, this is a pretty thin piece, the less it'll shrink. It'll shrink more to the target that you want it. Instead of it shrinking to about 25 inches, if it's really thick, it'll probably shrink to like 24 inches and 3/4. At that point, when you create your one-piece mold, your one-piece mold will create pieces that are like 23 inches and 3/4. You don't want that. You pass your target size. You pour your piece on your master mold. You pull it out. You'll have your seam line, of course, because this mold has a seam line going all the way around. And you let your piece sit for like 24 hours because it's going to continue to cure. And you work your seam line. You blend it in real well, as good as you can. And then you prep it. I personally take an armature and I put it back on the armature. No slit in the back or anything. It's just trimmed on the edges. Eyes aren't cut out, nose aren't cut out. And I secure my my master with hot glue on the edges. Just a little dab in the center as well, so it doesn't flap around. I do the same thing to the back. And I start brushing on plaster onto the master. I use 3 layers of Ultracal on the master. It produces a very thin, lightweight mold from it. Because the master has no seam line on it, the mold will have no seam line, of course, on it, because it's going to be a one-piece mold. A lot of people might be watching this video and say to yourself, well, after you have the stone all set up and everything, how the hell are you going to get this off the armature? Because it's encased in stone. We got undercuts. The answer is very simple. I pry my stone off the armature edges very gently, enough that it moves all the way around. I pry and I look for motion. Beforehand, actually, let's go back a little bit. Beforehand, before actually putting stone on this, I usually brush on some Vaseline on the armature itself. Like a good 2 inches of Vaseline, to prevent the stone from really holding on to the armature. And fast forward to the prying. I pry it off. Pry. And I just simply grab my stone and just do this to it. It's a headless armature. I just need it for neck support and support for the collarbone area and the trapezius area. I want my stone mold to actually have the contours that I sculpted on, which is this. I have the rest of the mask actually stuffed with paper bags up to the neck area, so it supports. I usually, when I am making a mold, it's much tighter than this. It only has a couple bags in here right now. After I open it up, I gently pry the master off of the production mold. And because it's a thin copy, I'll work my hands into the mold and collapse it from within and pull it out of the neck. And we got ourselves a nice, seamless one-piece mold. Some questions that might be asked from this video is, what do I seal my master with? My master is sealed with absolutely nothing, because this Ultracal will not stick to latex. Another question that might come up, why not use a urethane master? I have a urethane master of Chainsaw Tom, and every time I make a production mold, it needs to be a 2-piece mold. I try to cast a thin urethane from the mold, and the urethane just ripped apart as I was demolding it. It was sad. So I needed to make it really thick. And because it's so thick, it can't collapse within itself. It can't be pulled out of the neck, which is very, very important. Another tip I have, it has to do with the splash coat, the first initial splash coat of any mold that you do with Ultracal. There's a product out there called Daikeen Green. Daikeen Green is a dental stone product, which they use to make copies of teeth and so on, when they cast your teeth and so on. Put a half a cup of Daikeen Green into your first batch of Ultracal, your beauty coat. It'll strengthen the Ultracal tremendously, because a lot of times you'll make a mold and you'll notice it'll become very powdery at times. That's because the Ultracal formula has changed over the years, and it's a little weaker nowadays, so that keen will add that strength back into it, so it'll be less powdery and stuff like that. That's about it when it comes to this session. It's just helps you produce a one-piece copy of your mask without worrying about having to Dremel seam lines later on. It'll extend the lifespan of your master mold. This is going to be considered your master mold from now on. This has a lifespan of about 8 to 10 years, this master. Once it dries out and can't be used anymore, I will go back into the master and pour myself another master copy, work the seam line, and it'll take the place of this. That'll happen in about 8 to 10 years. If you keep your master stuffed with bags and covered with a paper bag, it'll last a long time. That's about it. That's how it's done. This is Nazael. Talk to you later.